Well, good morning, and I'm glad you were all here to share an experience that normally we don't get a chance. Harvard is the success of having been in high school at the same year that Celina, Karp, was in my class in 1948. And then part of it is my failure for telling you that we're going to watch her on Skype, and the Skype system didn't connect with hers, so we're going to do it through FaceTime on an iPhone. Little different. Last night, in desperation, I called Ted Baldwin, said, I need your help, and he's got me connected up from FaceTime on my iPhone into a computer that projects it onto the screen. So we're kind of making some adjustments as we go. We're not sure exactly how the speaker system is going to handle. So, move forward if you don't hear well enough. Well, a little bit about, I didn't really know her in high school. I was there for 3 years. She was there for only a short time. But she came in and had to be partially tutored to get her ready to enter these classes. And at that time, in '48, we across the country, and me as a high schooler, we didn't really know anything about the Holocaust. But very few people really knew it either. She says herself, if she talked about it, nobody would know what I am saying. So she says, I didn't talk about it. So very few people in class didn't talk about it. She left North High and went to Grinnell, got her bachelor's degree. And that's in Grinnell, Iowa. And she didn't talk about it there very much, because in those 40s and early 50s, people didn't really have an awareness. And the awareness quotient, according to her, really didn't come in until the book was published, Schindler's List. She is a member of Schindler's List and was the youngest person on Schindler's List. Last March, she was 88. Now she's 89. And so we're about the same age. She went on to New York City, got her master's degree, became a teacher, married a dentist. They retired in New York City, and then they went to California. A lot of what I'm saying really is relayed to you from my conversations with her. And we've had quite a few of them. Now, her comment, she's very willing to do this and happy to do it. She has made many talks, and I do hope that some of you have read the book. I know some have. I do hope that some of you have seen the movie, Schindler's List, and I know that some of you have. But I wanted to say a few comments about the book because of her comments to me. First of all, I found the book different than the books I normally read. So many of my books have been technical. This book has 38 chapters in it, but there's no index, and there's no chapter titles. It's just a number. So it's really one story divided up 38 times. So you finish chapter 1, you're not really sure what's going to happen in chapter 2, because there's no title to lead you into that. The story goes on. I asked Celina about that, and she says it's a very well documented book. what you read is very true and close to how it actually happened. I found it difficult to read because I don't read books that way. I read a technical book and I'm reading every word almost. And I'm having to read almost every word in this book to know the little complications and interfaces between people and what's happened. And then I have to kind of remember that for whatever is going to come. But it is an interesting book. To me, it was a hard book to read because of all the massive detail that's in here about lives so strangely put together and made to be together. The book was translated into a movie in 1993, Schindler's List. How many have seen Schindler's List? A good half of the room has. I wanted to get some of your comments briefly about the movie. Typically, what might have been one of the main points or things that struck you about the movie? Anybody want to tackle that?
So the people actually didn't survive the Holocaust.
It's a brutal movie to watch.
Yeah, the people actually did survive.
Yes. She has said that her mother gave her birth, and when she was in line to go to whatever the train was going to take her, and it turned out that train went to the gas chambers, Dr. Mengele, who was the medical doctor that one of the most evil men of the world's time, came up to her and she made a plea, and he pulled her out of that line and put her in this one. And it was from that line that Schindler picked her up. And the idea was that he was making products for the German army, and an adult may not be able to reach their arm inside the shell casings to clean them out. They needed young people to stick their little arms in there and clean them out. So he had about 1,200 people on the list. 900 of them were adults, and 200 or 300 were children. She was the youngest one on this list. He told them that in the process of keeping them working in the factories so he could make money and buy off all the people that he dealt with, that those on machine shop, if it says to cut it to a certain thousandth of an inch, cut more off than that, make it loose so that maybe it would fail. That's what they did. If you're loading shells with powder, gunpowder, put some sawdust in there so they don't go as far as they are supposed to and may not fire at all. So there was little ways. He never cared about a man at a stamping machine making a part that you could make in a minute and a half. But at the end of a 4-hour day, he's only got 9 parts in the bin. In other words, he's really working very slowly and he's not producing an awful lot. The commandant of the prison camp that he was in charge of, and Schindler using the people from that camp, figured out what he was doing. The only person that really challenged him on what he's getting by with. But the problem is he was on the take too. So if he exposed him, then he wouldn't be able to get all the extra stuff. The movie's black and white. But was it all black and white? There's one little girl, 3 years old, in a red coat in this black and white film.
Was that her?
No. The little girl in the red coat was a symbol. And she was walking along with all of the other prisoners like they were walking, but she seemed to be independent. She seemed to be there, but not a part of it. And a little girl in a red coat becomes the catalyst, which saves the lives of more than 1,000 Jews destined for the concentration camps. Steven Spielberg, when he made a movie, made her parents promise, and she, as a 3-year-old, made her promise never to see the movie until she was 18 years old. She saw it when she was 11. I'll pass this around. You can see what Oliwa Dabrowska, she played the little girl. She says, I was ashamed of being in the movie and angry at my mother and father when they told me about the part. The university student told the Times. She added that starring in the film led to much unwanted tension and harassment from well-meaning adults and school friends. She said she was horrified when watching the film for the first time at age 11, breaking her promise to Steven Spielberg to wait until she was 18. Here, I'll just pass that around so you can see that. The only other time you saw her after being in line was when her little red coat and her were in a wagon pulling the bodies of people that had deceased to the dump, where they dumped them.
Tom, we can see on the screen.
Yeah, we see her on screen.
Make it as loud as
I was trying to show her the crowd. Okay. Well, it's good to see you again, and we're looking forward to our time on the air with you.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay, great.
Not very well.
but
Hello, everybody, and Ollie. Another Ollie student. Tom suggested that I add a bit to the presentation that you might have seen. And so I have considered telling you a little bit about my time in Auschwitz, since most people don't know too much about what happens in that concentration camp. So let me start by telling you that 5 years ago I was invited to go to Auschwitz for the 70th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. There were 100 of us survivors. It was supposed to be the last large celebration because they felt that 10 years prior to that, they had about 1,500 survivors, and this time they only had 100, so they felt that was probably going to be the last one before the 80th. I understand there are some groups going to the 75th anniversary, which is on the 27th of January of this year. Now, what happened to me when I was there, as an 84-year-old woman, I had a most unusual experience, almost like an out-of-body experience. There I was, 84-year-old woman, but all I saw when I was looking at Auschwitz was the memories of a 13-year-old girl who was there for a certain amount of time. When I got back to the United States, I I signed up for a course at our Ollie, and the course was called Tapestry. I thought it was history of tapestries, but it turned out to be tapestry of poetry. Now, the interesting thing is that I had never written anything. I've spoken about my experiences, but I have never written anything down, no essays, not anything. I almost walked out of the room because poetry was not something that I was familiar with, but the teacher was an early teacher, there were only about 12 of us in the room, and I felt it would be embarrassing to leave the room. So I stayed. Now, this teacher happens to have been also the poet laureate of Ventura County here in California. And amazingly, what happened is that she was able to pull out memories of mine from the time when I was 13 years old. So I thought I would focus on that part and read some of the poetry to you, interspersed with what happened to me after our Plaszow concentration camp was liquidated, which was in September of 1044. As you know, I was on Schindler's List. I was the youngest person there. I was 13 years old. And as the camp was liquidated, Mr. Schindler got the permission to take 1,100 people to his new factory in Czechoslovakia. The 1,100 people were divided amongst 800 men and 300 women. In end of September, the 800 men were put into the wagons or the boxcars and sent off. We didn't know what happened to them because there was absolutely no communication. 2 weeks later, the 300 women were put in boxcars, and we were told we were going to a factory in Czechoslovakia. We traveled for about a day and a half. It was dark at night. We thought really that we'd be arriving in Czechoslovakia to join the men. As it turned out, however, when the doors opened, we found ourselves in the middle of the night in Auschwitz. We had no idea why we were in Auschwitz, the 300 women, but we were there. So these are the memories that sort of surfaced for me, what it was like to be in Auschwitz at that time as a 13-year-old girl. And so I wrote some of the poetry then. And so I will start with my first poem, and this is it. Night, so dark, so cold, the wagon sways. The rhythmic pounding of the wheels repeating sends a message to my frightened heart. Do not stop beating. The sudden lurch, screech of steel on steel. The door slides open. Rouse, rouse, angry voices shouting, a multitude of dogs barking. Plumes of fire illuminate the night sky. The smoke drifts over the gathered people. The smell, the awful smell. It is the smell of fear. We have arrived in hell. That was Auschwitz. Now let me tell you what happened next. We were gathered in a group, taken to a barrack, told to strip, leave our clothes behind. As we are naked, we walked through the barrack. There were lady barbers there who cut our hair. If they liked you, they only snipped bits and pieces. If they didn't like you, they shaved your whole head. From there, we proceeded to another barrack, which had a sign on the outside. It said sauna, which means bathhouse. We were shoved in there, all naked. Door was closed, And of course, at that point, we already known that Auschwitz was an extermination camp, and we knew about the fact that gas might come down from the shower heads above us. So for a few minutes there, it was absolute panic. We thought that was our last day on Earth. We couldn't wait to see what would happen. When the shower heads opened up and the water came down, it was an incredible elation because we knew that at least for the next one day, we were still alive. After the showers, we were taken into another barrack and we were distributed clothing, striped pajamas and wooden clogs, which meant that all the clothes that we left behind us in the first barrack were no longer part of us. We were now officially camp inmates. We were taken to our barracks. There were 100 women to each barracks, so we had 3 barracks for the 300 women. We still didn't know why we were there and what happened. Why did we ended up in Auschwitz rather than in Czechoslovakia? And so I'm going to give you some of the daily activities that happened. Every morning we were called to what was called the Appellplatz, which is a counting spot in front of the barrack. We were lined up in groups of 5 and counted each morning for about 2 hours. Already at this point it's late October and it is cold. Very cold. Poland is one of the cold countries that gets snowed. Then we would be assigned jobs like shoving snow, cleaning the latrines, going on KP duty, peel potatoes for our soup for lunchtime. Then we were counted again in the afternoon, and we were counted again in the evening, the same way as I mentioned before. It was so cold standing there in our striped pajamas and our clogs, bare, legs bare and everything, that we arranged a system in each group of 5. The person in front and the person in the very back would change spaces with the people in the middle in order to some heat in all of us. This went on for several weeks, doing our chores as such. Now, in between those times, we still don't know why we are there, but every so often we are taken on different projects around the campus. One of those projects was one day my mother volunteered to go with a group of 30 women to the for KP duty at the kitchen to peel potatoes because she was hoping to bring a few of the back with her under her striped pajama jacket so we would have a little extra food. It just so happens, I don't know why, but it did, that on that very day that my mother went, our barrack was taken for selection. Now, selection meant that you appeared in front of Dr. Mengele, completely nude, and he would then choose whether you were still a valuable member for work or put you, if you are too old or too young, someplace else for extermination. So that particular day, we were taken, and we were told to strip, stand completely naked, and that was my experience, and I wrote another poem about it and give you an idea of what it was like. I call it Selection. There he stands, resplendent in his uniform, shiny black boots, insignia on his chest, swastika armband on his sleeve, and in his hand a pencil. unusual, this pencil, for with one flick to either left or right, it has the power to give you life or death. In front of him, a line of naked women, all shapes and sizes. This is my second time confronting the pencil. First time was not lucky. But the pencil beckons the group back into the line. My body is skinny, undeveloped, but clean. Don't know how or why. The will to live forces me to utter 3 words. Lassen Sie mich, which in English means let me go. This time, the pencil slowly leans to life. I grab my pile of clothes, hugging them, run out into the snowy outdoors. My pent-up emotions burst forth. Hysterically crying, start to put on my clothes. I am only 13, and I've gotten a reprieve from death from Dr. Mengele, the butcher of Auschwitz. As I'm outside getting the group of 30 women, my mother among them, running towards. My mother, of course, is hysterical because she didn't know. She heard that the barrack was being taken for selection, and she didn't know whether I would survive or not. One of the things that happened to me after that in my long life is that I have realized that you cannot predict at all how you would act in any particular situation. If my mother had been there, would I have depended upon her to save me or not? So I've become much less judgmental in terms of knowing, of predicting how anybody would act in any particular way. You cannot walk in other people's shoes. You really don't know the circumstances and the motivation of various people in their acts. We stayed in Auschwitz like that for about 5.5, almost 6 weeks. At one point, we were taken to be tattooed, and we thought, okay, well, that means that we will be here forever. We will be Auschwitz inmates once we are tattooed. It turns out that we are the only 300 women who were not tattooed, because as we were walking to the barrack where the tattooer was going to put numbers on us, we are veered to another area where we see Oskar Schindler, who had come down on his own from Czechoslovakia to liberate his women. He had brought with him quite a bit of money to bribe the commandant. And I'm pretty sure at this point that it was the commandant who was expecting this bribe before he released us. Mr. Schindler tells us to quickly get into the boxcars, which we do, and then we proceed to go on. It took us 2 days and 2 nights to get back to Schindler's factory. And when the doors open up, this is now already at end of November. When the doors open up, we see a barbed wire, and behind the barbed wire, we see the men. That was the first time that we knew that the man had made it to the Mr. Schindler's factory. Of course, they don't recognize us because all of us are now in striped pajamas and shaved, some of us, and emaciated because we hadn't had too much to eat. But the reunion over the barbed wire is great. We now know that Mr. Schindler is going to really protect us because of what he has done so far. He tells us the factory produces metal casings for the V-2s, the rockets that were raining onto London. He tells us that nothing out of that factory is going to go out and be useful. He tells us to sabotage everything. In order to sabotage everything, we had to, the calibrators that would show that a part was measured correctly were also fixed in such a way that they showed they were correct, but they were not. And so nothing from that factory ever left to Germany. Mr. Schindler builds barracks on top of the factory for us to be there. The barracks in Auschwitz were such that 5 people were in one berth, which meant that if you were foot to head to foot, so if you had to turn, the entire 5 people had to turn, you know. But here, the barracks are fitted on top of the factory, and because the factory is heated, the barracks on top of the factory are also heated. The berths are 2 people to a berth. They're still narrow, so that we still sleep head to foot, but at least it's only 2 people. I am with my mother, which is wonderful, you know. We are there, and Mrs. Schindler is extremely helpful to Mr. Schindler in terms of foraging for food. This is the winter already. Foraging for food on the farms around the area, which is in Moravia. She brings in such things as rutabagas and other things to put into our meager soup. We get a cup of chicory coffee in the morning and half a slice of bread. I remember that my dream was always to have a whole loaf of bread to be able to slice, keep slicing slices of it. I happened to have gotten sick at one point. My job, by the way, at the factory is to clean the machinery. There's another girl and myself. Because we have thin arms, we're able to reach into the various machinery to clean it and oil it. I got sick at one point because I had I had all kinds of diseases in prior camps. This time my liver sort of acted up, so I ended up in the infirmary. Now, Mrs. Schindler was so nice and human being. She would come in every morning at 10 o'clock to the infirmary. She would have cooked a hot pot of farina. Do you know what farina is? It's like buckwheat or I guess oatmeal, something like that. And she would dish out a spoonful of that into our bowls, and that was incredibly helpful nourishment, to keep us alive. Finally, we hear that we have a clandestine radio, and in April, we hear that President Roosevelt had died, and we are very shocked and upset over that because we really depended upon the United States to finish the war and to liberate us. So this is what happens. Finally, on May 8th, the war is over in Europe. However, because of the Yalta Agreement between the powers, United States was going to liberate Germany, and Russia was going to liberate Czechoslovakia. Now, the Russians were further away from where we were, so instead of us being liberated on the 8th of May, we are now waiting for them to come on the 9th of May, which they do. Finally, so we're still behind the barbed wire. But what we do on the 8th is to make sure that Mr. Schindler and Mrs. Schindler, who saved us, we are all there, the 1,100 people. We make sure that they are able to escape. He gathers us on the floor of the factory, and has tears in his eyes because truly he spent every penny that he could on saving people, and he's so sorry that he couldn't save more people. Some of the men had gathered the gold from their teeth, and we have a silversmith amongst us, and he makes a ring for Mr. Schindler to put on his finger, and inside the ring are Hebrew letters carved in, and the Hebrew letters say, "He who saves one saves the world entire." That is given to Mr. Schindler. He has tears in his eyes. We dress him in striped pajamas, both he and Mrs. Schindler. Two of our young men are accompanying them in their car, and they were going to drive them during the night into the American zone, because we felt that if they stayed, the Russians would never believe that he helped us, and they would only look upon him as a Nazi, which he was, to begin with. And so they drive him into the American zone, and we then expect to be liberated by the Russian army. On the 9th, during the daytime, the army comes around. It's a bedraggled group of people. One guy is on a horseback. Next to him is a kid, practically, with a machine gun, and women. You would never think of it as an army, but they've been walking all across the Czechoslovakia to come to this particular place in Moravia and to liberate us. So now we are free, and I remember this. I call it Liberation, May 9th, 1945. We are survivors. To exit barbed wire gates, 2 days we are waiting, not safe on the outside, with black shirts still marauding. A soldier on horse appears in the distance. Behind him, a small, bedraggled group of soldiers. They have come to liberate us. We are survivors. The barbed wire gates open. We are free, hesitant to venture beyond. How can one walk alone, not in a row of 5, not overseen by guards, armed, ready to shoot? We are survivors. How, after 5 years following orders, can we think and act on our own? Will we be able to restore our humanity, or will we always be held suspect in society? Will there be a rejoining with the rest of the family, or will we encounter the loss forever gone into eternity? We are survivors. Freedom is ours. Comes with problems. Can we retrieve former lives? Can we go back to homes we lost? Having experienced horrific events, starving, fearful, we start our journey. 11 days walking, hitching, emaciated scarecrows reach Krakow. There is no welcome. We are not wanted. 4 months later, we're back on the road, leaving Europe, seeking a new existence in more welcoming countries. We are survivors. We shall succeed. We ended up in Krakow, of course, and of course everybody knew that we were that we were liberated from a concentration camp because we looked it. I only weighed 35 kilos, which is about 17 pounds, and I was as tall as I am now. That's really what saved me, was my height, because then I did not look like a little kid in a group of 5, but rather was the same height as most of the women. We have priorities when we get to Krakow, 2 priorities really. Priority number 1 was to notify the Red Cross and our family on the outside of Europe that we had survived. My father had brother in Palestine and another brother in the United States. So we notify the Red Cross that as a family we have survived. Then we notified the Jewish survivors group to look for anybody in our family that might have survived the Holocaust, to notify them or for us to find out about them. The second priority is my education. I could read, but I had only had finished second grade when the war broke out. And I was without any education for 5 years. And here I was, a young girl, almost to be 14, without the ability to write. I've never had a pencil in my hand, and really needed to rejoin school, but I had nothing in my head. So we hired a tutor. What I forgot to tell you is that Mr. Schindler was so thinking ahead for us. The factory that he took over in Czechoslovakia became a munitions factory, but at one point was a sewing factory. And there were some bolts of cloth and scissors and implements like that, needles, etc., that were still excellent. And so he made sure that each family got 2 bolts of cloth and about 5 pairs of scissors, which he felt would serve as a barter, so we could exchange some of that because we had no money or anything, on our trip to Krakow and also in Krakow. It is exactly what we did. We used some of the fabric to get a room to live in, or sublet it from another lady, Polish lady, and the other bits and pieces that we had, we bartered for a tutor to teach me everything that I needed to know in order to qualify for school. Fortunately, it is the summer. We are in Krakow in May, and I don't have to go to school till September. I'm so delighted to study because my head is absolutely empty. So no matter what I attempt to learn, it just sticks in beautifully. I took the exams in September, beginning of September. Another girl and myself made it in, another Jewish girl and myself made it into the high school. The schools in Krakow were divided by boys' schools and girls' schools. Mine was an all-girls school. So I started in this school, and I'm absolutely delighted to be taught and to have young people around me, etc. But that doesn't last, unfortunately. September happens to be the month of Jewish holidays, Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, and there's an incredible pogrom at eastern part of Poland. And my parents decide that with this new virulent anti-Semitism in Poland, they weren't going to stay there. It is also at this point we've already heard through the Red Cross that both my uncle in Palestine and my uncle in United States were going to try and send affidavits for us so we could leave Europe. So my parents decide we're going to leave Poland, and unfortunately at that point, the borders between Poland and other places have already been closed. So at night, by bribing a Russian soldier, we hide in his truck under some pieces of furniture, and he drives us through the border back into Czechoslovakia. And now we are in Czechoslovakia, and we are there for about 2 weeks, again traversing through Czechoslovakia back towards the American zone, because we figured we're going to cross over to the American zone at night over the border, and there we will be able to wait for the affidavits to come to us. So we do that at night, and we end up in Germany, in the American zone. The first couple weeks we spent at a displaced persons camp, but my mother decides that no way she's gonna stay in another camp. She's had enough of camps, and I've been forever grateful to my parents for having made that decision. So we opt for a small apartment, sharing an apartment with a German woman in a small town called Mindelheim. Her husband was a Nazi and was killed during the war, so the room was requisitioned from her. But we lived there for 2 years, and we're very, very comfortable with her, and she's comfortable with us. We decided to live on ration cards and packages from UNRWA, which is the United Nations Relief Organization. Those packages were wonderful because they had such items in them that the Germans hadn't seen in years. Cocoa, coffee, cigarettes, soap, all kinds of chocolate, all kinds of good things like that. We did not use them, but we used them for barter again, for my education. As it happens, I'm now in Germany. I had just studied everything in Poland to make it into a Polish high school. So now I'm in Germany, and I cannot go to school again because I don't know enough German, etc. So now I'm also being tutored by various people, by bartering chocolate and cigarettes and stuff like that for the next 2 years. One of the best things that happened to me was that my parents knew that we were going to now go to the United States and wanted me to learn English. There was a convent in that town called the English Sisters. It was a semi-cloistered convent. The nuns were teachers. The children went in for the education, but none of the nuns left the convent because they were semi-cloistered like that. It is arranged by my parents with one of the nuns, who is a retired nun, English teacher. She's 90 years old. For her to give me lessons in English and in German at the same time. It was the best thing that ever happened to me, because she really helped me get over all kinds of things, aside from teaching me German and teaching me English. So I wrote a poem about her because she was a very important person in my life. Her name is Mata Leontine. In a small town in southern Bavaria, in a semi-cloistered convent, home of the English Sisters, a 90-year-old retired nun entered the convent at age 16, never left in all these years. She's German and Catholic. She will teach a 14-year-old girl traumatized by years of ghettos and camps, German and English. She does not know she's supposed to hate her. Hitler's ideas of propaganda are not part of her knowledge. Her outlook on life, gentle manner, and total acceptance slowly work the magic of transformation. The realization, not all Germans are ogres. Hatred is corrosive. Have to work through anger and hate to move forward in life. We bond for 2 years. Leaving for America, our letters crisscross the oceans for the next 2 years. Mata Leontine loves to hear about America. She's so very happy to hear about my new life. The letter arrives from Mother Superior. At 94, Mata Leontine is no longer with us. That is absurd. That cannot be. For I have all her letters still, for she will always be a part of me in my heart and memories, for she was my salvation. After 2 years in that town, we finally leave for the United States. But my 2 years in that town were extremely restorative because the town was a microcosm of simpler life. As a matter of fact, at Christmas time, on the first Christmas after the end of the war, I wrote a poem that I thought called Silent Night. Every time I hear Silent Night, it brings me back to a snowy night in Mindelheim, Germany. The first winter after the war, the night sky is illuminated by a myriad of blinking stars. The church bells are ringing out Stille Nacht. No bombs falling, no loud noises of shooting, or soldiers' boots marching, no commandants shouting, into rows of 5 pushing, no more in fright cowering. We have survived. It is Christmas Eve and I am free. I feel the peace and tranquility and hope for goodwill to all mankind to take hold. After 2 years, we're told by the American government that our affidavits have arrived and we have to pick them up in Munich at the American consulate. So we take a train from Mindelheim, which is only about 30 kilometers to Munich, and we go there, we get off, and who do we meet on the street but Oskar Schindler? He is incredibly happy to see our family and to know that we are going to the United States. Though was the whole point of his saving families, because he felt that by saving a family, you perpetuated new generations. He's thrilled to know that we are all going to the United States. You know, Mr. Schindler was not well accepted after the war in Germany or in any place. The only place that he felt comfortable, by the way, he and his wife ended up in Argentina after the war, but the only place that he felt accepted and happy was in Israel, because there were a lot of people that he saved settled in Israel. He would go there and the people would have parties for him, etc. As a matter of fact, he was so happy in Israel that he's buried there in the Catholic cemetery in Jerusalem. As a matter of fact, this is a little trivia question. You can always ask people what Nazi is buried in Israel, and it is Oskar Schindler. So after 2 years, we get our affidavits, and we take, again, boxcars up to Bremenhaven, which is the port from which we were going to go to the United States. And here is my take on that. The name of the ship is SSC Marlin. The fog horns sound. The engines begin to chug. Today is my birthday. I'm 16 years old. The SSC Marlin is a vessel of hope for my new life. I turn and look east, see the continent slowly disappearing. It is a place I know and understand. It is a place that does not want me. Maybe the West will be more welcoming. The SSC Marlin is a troop ship. It ferried soldiers to fight Nazism. Now it ferries Europe's discard immigrants with guarded hope. Will this new place grant them an identity? Will it restore and protect their humanity? Only the future will tell. For now, they are happy they have escaped Europe's hell. They'll end up in New York. My uncle, who lives in Iowa, picks us up in his car, and we drive to Des Moines, Iowa. A place that I'm absolutely amazed to find out how vast the United States is. And of course, when you realize that Des Moines, Iowa is only about a third into the United States, you realize what it was about. It was just a wonderful trip. We end up in Iowa, and right away, I go and take all my course papers and books and things that I have accomplished in the 2 years in Germany. By the way, at this point, I'm quite fluent in German, but not so fluent in English. I speak with a kind of a funny accent. Anyway, I take all my books and everything, and since my cousins all went to North High School, I take them and bring them to North High School for them to find out what class would I fit into. As it turns out, they look at all the notebooks and everything, and they decide that I've covered enough material to enter 12th grade. So now, having only had second grade and no other grades in between, I end up in 12th grade, but I have to take 2 courses that are required that I don't have, and that is American Literature, which is 11th grade subject, and American History, which is also an 11th grade subject. I do those at East High School in Des Moines over the summer. In the fall of September 1947, I end up in North High School, and for a whole year, I have a wonderful experience. I love it, and the best part of it is that when I graduate, or before I graduate really, the girls advisor at North High School, Miss Essie Query, I'll never forget her name, she happens to be a graduate of Grinnell College, and decided that I should continue my education at Grinnell College. She drives me there, takes all my papers with her and my grades that I have received at North High School, tries to get Grinnell College to give me a scholarship, academic scholarship, and work program for my 4 years at that school, which is what happens. And then in September of 1947, I end up, 48, I end up at Grinnell College, where I am for the next 4 years. And that is my experience, and I'm forever grateful to Des Moines in particular, because it was a community that really welcomed our family. We were the first displaced people to come to Des Moines. Our community was very welcoming. School was very welcoming. And Iowa truly educated me because of North High School, East High School, and Grinnell College. Went on from there later on to New York to study some more. Became a teacher. I taught for about 27 years. Worked with youngsters who had difficulty learning because I could understand and feel for them that way. And so here is my last poem, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you want to have. The last poem is called Tree. In Jerusalem, in Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum in the Street of the Righteous Gentiles, in a designated third spot from the start, a man plants a tree. Womanizer, cheater, black market profiteer, risk taker, gambler, takes on the biggest gamble of his life. He puts 1,100 names on a list, lies, bribes authorities, wrenches a group of human beings from the jaws of evil. The group under his protection will survive the war. Magnificent, this tree, dedicated to Oskar Schindler. As it grows and spreads its limbs, roots and branches proliferate. So do the descendants, the saved group's new generations. I bear witness. Evil can be harnessed. People of goodwill can make a difference. Forever I shall be in debt and grateful to Oskar Schindler for giving me a life. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you, Celina. We are just... And I would like to also say that my sister, who graduated from North High, is sitting in the back of the room there, and she's waving to you now.
I was there for a year when you were there, Celina. I went to North in 1948. In
We
1947.
probably had the same teachers. I had Mrs.
Probably.
Wilson for Latin, Miss Scott for English. I still remember all those people.
Who did you have for history?
I'm sorry?
Do you remember who you had for history? The history class?
Who
I
did?
had Mr. Laurie for civics.
Oh, yeah, okay, I know that.
Yes. And he and his daughter, Jean Laurie, ended up at Grinnell with me, and we've been communicating over the years many, many times.
Oh, really? I knew her too. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your speech.
I had to introduce her there for you, but I do have some questions for you. And here is one from one of our people. And by the way, Celina is a member of OLLI out in California and has been a member for 13, 14, 15 years. So you have an OLLI group here, and we're so pleased that we're all a part of the same. So the first question I read is, do you see a time when humanity is no longer plagued by hate?
Let's hope, but the only way you can prevent, I speak to an awful lot of groups. I have such faith in the younger people, because when I speak at colleges to groups of young students, I see the diversity, I see the acceptance of other people, I see their point of view is really to accept, they are willing to try new things, and they don't seem to be involved with tribalism as much as the older generations were as such. I just recently spoke at Ames, Iowa, to about almost 600 people there. I've spoken a lot in Iowa to various groups, including a couple times to my own college of Grinnell College. Hate is so corrosive because it's corrosive to the person who hates. The person whom you hate doesn't know that you are hating them, really. I mean, it doesn't affect them as much unless you act in a certain way. That's different. But the hate that you feel is really doing damage to your own person.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes. Here is one. What was the fate of survivors? Good future, PTSD, or anything like that you might want to add to?
Well, it all depends. I was very fortunate that my parents, who lost everybody in the Holocaust. My mother lost the entire family. My father lost all his sisters except for the brothers that lived on the outside. They were very resilient and forward-looking. My mother's famous talk always was, the world doesn't owe you anything. You do the best you have with what you have. And I'm so grateful to them for not putting a guilt stick of any sort on me or my family or my grandchildren. And I've tried to be the same way with my family. My 4 grandchildren are so open to society. It's a pleasure for me to see that I was able to bring about another generation of not, of no hate, of acceptance, etc.
Thank you. Here is a
Am
question.
I opening you up? Yes, you got 1 minute.
What language did you speak in the camps? Yiddish, or you can explain that?
I never, nobody in my family spoke Yiddish. We lived in a very mixed neighborhood. What I heard in the camp, I spoke Polish mostly in the camps, but that's where I picked up a few words of Yiddish because other people spoke Yiddish, and some of them sang songs in Yiddish. So I have a few, I know a few words, and of course since I've gotten bigger and grown older, I've picked up a few more words too. But I don't really know Yiddish. I know German, and Yiddish is really the old German language from about 17th century, the Low German.
Another question. People that deny, how have you found a way to answer why people are this way?
Well, it's very interesting because, I've been very close to Steven Spielberg. I always say Oscar Schindler saved my life, but Steven Spielberg gave me a voice, so he's my second Schindler. It was by making the movie Schindler's List that allowed me to really focus on the experiences and speak about it. Oscar Schindler, Steven Spielberg, at one point, after he made the film, he decided he wasn't going to make anything out of it. But in 2002, he decided to, because that was the anniversary, the film came out in 1993. In 2002 or 2003 was the 10th anniversary. He wasn't going to do anything, except there was so much Holocaust denying, particularly in the film community. One father and son in particular, he's quite a famous actor. I'll not mention the name. So he decided to put out a DVD of the film, but it's a different kind of a DVD. The DVD has the film on one side, and on the other side, on the back side, is 70 minutes of voices from the list. I'm one of those voices. There's several of us supporting the film and telling exactly what happened. So in that sense, there is a record. After all the DVDs are crumbled and put under earth or whatever, there may not be a record, but right now there is a record that supports the Holocaust, at least from several of us voices from the list. So if you're interested, you could actually get the DVD from your library, I'm sure, and on the DVD on the back side is the 70 minutes voices from the list that tell about really what happened to us on Schindler's List.
Tell us a little bit more about the foundation that acquired
Oh,
50,000
Steven Spielberg, when he went to film the film in Poland, and it is filmed in black and white to give it more reality with a handheld camera. He said that several people came up to him and told him and said to him, have I got a story to tell you? You know. So he decided at that point that he was going to record all of the stories of survivors for posterity. So he took his own take from the film, which was about $50 million, not what the film grossed for the other company, but his own amount. Took the $50 million and started the Shoah Foundation. He sent people all over the world to interview survivors. So he really gave the voice to 56,000 depositions or histories are on the Shoah Foundation website. These are used now, and now they have started taking depositions from people from Rwanda, the genocide there, the Armenian genocide, the Shanghai massacre. What they do with the depositions is that they use them for teaching young people about the Holocaust. For example, if somebody wants to know what it was like to be 13 years old in Auschwitz, and they click on that, my name might come up. It was translated into German. It was my deposition. It is in English. It is in Polish. It is at various places in the world, at various institutes of learning. So you can go to a museum and see artifacts. You can read about the Holocaust in the book. You can do all of those things, but nothing connects like the human voice. So when somebody clicks on, and a human voice sits across them on a computer and tells them exactly what happened, that is a marvelous teaching tool. And this is what the Shoah Foundation does with various schools in various places.
Celina,
Yeah.
it has been very moving time for all of us. Do we have any more questions for her?
Can she see it?
Just thanks.
You need a standing ovation.
We have one more question.
I would like to know about your life before you get into a camp, the transition from a normal life into this abnormal life.
Okay. I was 8 years old when the war broke out in Poland, when we were invaded by the Germans. Right away, I had just finished second grade. This was in September. I was supposed to go into third grade. All the schools were closed. Some of them later reopened, but only for Christians and not for Jews. The Jews were not allowed to go to any school after that. Right away, what happened is that within about 5 months, things started happening. We were told to put on our yellow stars. We were told to wear armbands. It was winter, so the Jews were told to go outside and shovel snow. Within about 4 months, our apartment was taken from us. We were told to move into the ghetto. It took them about 3 or 4 months to pick a place on the outside, really, of Krakow, one of the suburbs, to organize and make a ghetto out of it. And slowly, at first, the ghetto was you were able to walk out of it and only lived in it. You were able to go to work on the outside. My parents were both accountants before the war, after the war, and now, they were continued. Accounting happens to be a very international language, so my parents were able to get positions right away when we moved into Des Moines, because they knew books, etc. But as I said, my parents continued to work. One of the accounts that my father had was with a sewing factory called Hogo, which was a Jewish-owned factory. That factory then was taken over, just like Schindler got a Malian factory and an enamel factory. Madrid got a sewing factory, and my father continued working there. From the ghetto, they would go there to he rented a factory for them, for Madrid. What happened after that? Pretty soon the ghetto was closed, and the only way you could get out of the ghetto to go to work is if you had a blue card. The blue card meant that you could leave the ghetto and go and work on the outside in one of the German-occupied factories. The only problem was I was too young. My parents, at first I worked in the ghetto with other children in two cooperatives. One of the cooperatives was for making envelopes. You were given pieces of paper, we licked the sides, put them together into an envelope. Another cooperative was a brush cooperative where we were given bits and pieces of and wire and cut out wooden brushes, and we had to put the bristles into the holes in the brush and wire it together. There were a lot of selections all the time in the ghetto. Finally, the ghetto was closed in 1943, and we were all taken into the camp. But while the ghetto was still operating, in order to go outside, there were, as I said, you needed the blue card. All kinds of selections were taking place in the ghetto. Older people, younger people were routinely removed. We were told they were taken to different places, but pretty soon we all knew that whoever left the ghetto never came back. My parents, who were going on the outside and leaving me alone in the ghetto, were very upset about it and petrified that something would happen to me. So they bribed some authorities to add 2 years to my my age, because if I was 12, I could go out and work. But I wasn't. I was only 10. So my record was, they bribed, and I was able to get a blue card, and then left with my parents to their work, where I worked on a sewing machine at the sewing factory, which was then continued because under Madrid, because they were making, instead of making shirts, they were making uniforms, heavy uniforms, and this continued into the camp. Eventually, the factory was brought into the Plaszow concentration camp. Madrid was an extremely helpful, decent human being. We were making uniforms out of a heavy load, the pressed wool for uniforms, and those bales were huge and very heavy. And when the truck would come in with these bales to the concentration camp, he would bring extra bread, medications, and things that people had asked him to bring in under the bales, because nobody was able to move the bales, at the checkpoint. So in that sense, he was very instrumental also in helping people very much. He also has a tree at Yad Vashem as a righteous Gentile.
Celina, thank you so very much.
Thank you.